Hi guys, Black Box here. Today I'm doing an approach into the airport of Innsbruck. I'll be flying the localizer approach for runway 26. Now the approach itself is pretty challenging. You have very high mountains left and right of the localizer, and also the glide profile is pretty steep with an angle of 3.77 degrees. Presently we're inbound the beacon Rattenberg, presently maintaining 9,500 feet, which is also the minimum holding altitude at Rattenberg. Now, even though we have a holding pattern published and inserted in the FMS, we're just gonna fly the entry, and once we're back on course towards Rattenberg, we'll start the approach. Now, before I get into the approach briefing itself, we'll have a look at the performance page of the MCDU. You can see that I've inserted the weather. Pretty fair conditions, good visibility, only light wind, and the minimum for the approach, since we can fly the 5% go-round gradient, we'll use the minimum of 3,300 feet. For the approach itself, later on, we'll use the localizer mode, and for the descent, we'll use flight path angle. Now, even though it's a localizer approach, you'll see a glide slope indicated on the primary flight display later on. Nevertheless, even though it is displayed, it's not to be used, and so we'll just ignore that. We'll be doing the distance and altitude checks on the chart itself. For the approach itself, once we'll pass Rattenberg again, we'll go on the track of 210 degrees outbound. That'll be about 6 miles. We'll maintain 9,500 feet, and then we'll intercept the localizer, which has an inbound course of 255 degrees. The runway track itself is at 258 degrees, so there is a 3-degree offset to this approach. As I said, the approach glide path is 3.77 degrees, and we'll check the final altitude at 5,500 feet, which equals 9 dme from the Oscar Echo Victor DME. Minimum is 3,300 feet. In case of missed approach, we'll climb straight ahead with maximum climb gradient until 1 dme from Oscar Echo Victor DME, that is before that point. Left turn, and we'll intercept the QDM 060 Alpha Bravo towards Alpha Bravo. The max turn radius allowable is 0.9 miles. And then we'll track the 075 localizer Oscar Echo Victor outbound until 14 dme. Then we'll turn left and proceed direct Rattenberg, climbing 9,500 feet. Now the runway is pretty short, with 1,940 meters. We'll be requiring about 1,700 meters, so there's not that much margin. We've selected outer brake medium, and we'll use full reverse and config full. Now, from Rattenberg to the localizer course, you'll see that we're well below the minimum safe altitude of 14,200 feet. However, as long as we are tracking the 210 QDR from Rattenberg, we'll be on the right track, and we'll be able to maintain 9,500 feet. Now, be reminded that this is a conventional approach, so after passing Rattenberg, we'll be tracking the ADF needle and using track as our mode for the outbound tracking. Okay, while we're tracking inbound to Rattenberg, we'll be reading the approach checklist. So, approach checklist, briefing is performed, and MDA 3,300 feet is set. Okay, so let's go ahead and select track FPA. Okay, so I have selected the track 210 degrees. Just waiting for the needle to drop, indicating that we're over at the station Rattenberg. And then I'll pull on the heading knob to select the track. Here we go. Needle is turning, and so I've selected track. Now, in order not to get confused with the navigation display and the track lines there, I'm using the ROS LS mode. Okay, still tracking outbound, and now we're just waiting for the localizer to come in, and the LOC blue changed to LOC star. And there you go, LOC star. Now the lateral navigation is just done by the LOC mode. Later on we'll have to descend ourselves using the flight path angle mode. Like I said before, there will be a glide slope indication on the primary flight display. Nevertheless, to use that is not authorized, and so we'll have to just check the correct altitude by our DME readings from the chart. In order for the flight path angle to work and to descend out of 9,500 feet, I've set the altitude in the flight control unit to 10,000 feet. Selecting flaps 1 and just watching our descent point at 19 DME from Oscar Echo Victor. However, I will be starting the approach at 19.3 DME. And that is to account for the lag between the selection of the flight path angle until the aircraft actually starts its descent. Okay, in the FMA it says flight path angle 3.8 degrees, selecting flaps 2. And now we have to carefully monitor our altitudes with respect to the DME Oscar Echo Victor. Selecting gear down. Now the first altitude check coming up at 17 DME. Crossing altitude should be 8,700 feet. So we are on the correct glide profile. Right, next cross check coming up, 14 DME, and the crossing altitude should be 7,500 feet. Perfect. cross check at 10 dME, altitude should be 5,920 feet. Still right on track. Selecting flaps 3 and flaps full. Final altitude check coming up at 9 dME, 5,500 feet. Final altitude is checked. Next we'll do the VLS check. We can see that we have to increase the V approach by 2 knots. Okay, another check coming up. 6.3 dME, altitude should be 4,400 feet. Okay, landing checklist. Go around altitude 9,500 feet set. ECA memo, landing no blue. Right, manual thrust. Manual flight. Okay, runway and the puppies are in sight.
Above. Minimum.
Continue. Checked. Still slightly higher, correcting.
$500. 400. 300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. Reach up 10. 5.
Spoilers. Reverse green. Decel. 70 knots. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that's how you fly the localizer approach runway 26 in Innsbruck. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like. And I'll be doing a Innsbruck visual approach soon. As always, happy landings, and I'll see you in the next one.